Could I call upon Councillor Irvine to propose a motion, item 13A?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It gives me great pleasure to present this motion, which is aimed at paving the way and preparing the ground for what I believe is a vital component of our democratic system. Now, I appreciate that this is a complex issue which will not be fully addressed through one motion. But I think it is important that we set a direction of travel this evening and send out a clear message to the residents whom we were elected to represent that they are the boss. They put their faith in us as elected representatives, and I think that it is only right and proper that a mechanism should be introduced which will allow the public to sack their representatives if they fail to deliver, or where they are convicted of a criminal offence or otherwise lose the confidence of those they were elected to represent. Now, for example, in 2010, a member of the Conservative group was caught picking up a prostitute and accepted a police caution for doing so. The Conservatives, to their credit, rightly expelled the councillor concerned. However, despite being kicked out of the Conservative group and despite numerous calls to resign, this councillor was, quite shockingly, allowed to serve out the remainder of their time in office as an independent councillor. Residents in the ward concerned were quite rightly appalled at being represented on the council by this individual, and I don't think that that is good enough. Now, up and down the country, we see elected councillors from all parties, and I do mean all parties, saying things, doing things which in any other walk of life would lead to instant dismissal from their job. And yet, there is no such mechanism for elected representatives. As long as a councillor is able to attend a certain amount of meetings, they can remain in place until the next election comes round, regardless of how little work they put in, regardless of how they act or what they say, regardless of whether they have the backing of their residents or not. And I believe that is wrong. The motion before you this evening is aimed at initiating a debate to rebalance how our democracy works, taking power away from elected representatives and giving control back to the public, who should ultimately have the final say in how they are governed and by whom. They are the boss, and we must never forget that. I believe the motion before you this evening is self-explanatory. I believe it is measured. I think the threshold of 30% of eligible voters in a ward who can trigger a local by-election is realistic and achievable, but sufficiently high so as to stop potentially vexatious and politically motivated attacks on councillors. Members, I do hope that this motion will enjoy cross-party support this evening. We have an opportunity to send out a clear message to residents that we are listening and that we are accountable. An agreement by all parties this evening will send out a powerful message, not just to local residents, but to the country, that we here in Medway are leading the way on this issue. And I urge you all to please support this motion if you believe that we should be putting people, not politics, first. Thank you.
Is that supported? Do you wish to speak now or later? Speak later. Murray.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm going to propose an amendment, Mr Mayor. It's just being circulated.
Councillor Murray.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that people have got sight of the motion, the amendment now. It's a simple, straightforward amendment, and I'll explain why the Labour Group are making it. For the purpose of this motion, and perhaps this motion only, I'm going to give Councillor Irvine the benefit of the doubt and say that it is well-intentioned. But unfortunately, you know, in his speech, he chose to attack someone who is not here to speak for themselves, regardless of the outcome of the case that he was referring to. The point about this is that the recall legislation in Parliament got cross-party support, and I think many people would feel that it was remiss and disappointing that that legislation was not extended to cover all elected members, but nevertheless we are where we are. What the amendment does is give a future Medway Council an opportunity to take a serious look at our code of conduct first, recognise that its current provisions don't meet modern public expectation, whether or not it complies with national guidelines, and gives us the ability as a council to come forward with some serious recommendations which could then be sent to a new Secretary of State. Now, the reason the Labour Group are taking this approach is that there is a process in the Council for reviewing the Code of Conduct. Personally, I do think it needs reviewing and modernising, and so do the rest of the Labour Group. And we have got a responsibility to adequately protect the public purse from the kind of vexatious and indeed vanity by-elections that Councillor Irvine has spoken of. I'm not sure that the proportions that he is suggesting would actually work. I would like to have the opportunity to look at it carefully and take advice about it. I would want to make sure that nobody in the wider public was disadvantaged. And more than that, I would want to make sure that we have an opportunity to actually ask the public what they think before we come forward with recommendations. And I would hope that we can work with the Code of Conduct Committee to make sure that that happens. The other thing that I would say is that one of the best ways to prevent councillors from being recalled is for them to work with their communities, to get involved in the things that people are doing, to listen what local people are saying, to be serious about consultations when we have them and show that the answers have actually influenced the direction of travel of the community, and to be available at any time to anybody who wants to speak to a councillor, get help and support from a councillor,
Councillor,
or
your time is up.
Interpret things.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Is that supported? Do you wish?
Seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Do you wish to speak now or later?
Reserve my right to speak later.
Okay. Any members? No. Nope. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I support my colleague, Councillor Murray, in the amendment. Whilst accepting that recall is a sensible measure in Westminster, there are a number of concerns why, on a more local basis, it would be significantly open to abuse by those with money and influence. Citing an example, if, say, an individual were a councillor and a parliamentary candidate, a campaign could be run to oust the individual and embarrass them. And therefore, there are situations at a micro level which are simply not reflected at a macro level on a constituency basis. The thresholds also suggested within the motion are also not appropriate and could be open to abuse. It is the ultimate right of the public to deselect individuals, and obviously parties have to be within the right to expel those they see fit. However, ultimately it is the election which decides, the local elections and general elections which decide whether an individual has been made inappropriate. And at a local level, that is the most appropriate space for it to happen. However, we are open to dialogue, and we think that residents should be consulted in an appropriate way, and this amendment seeks to do that. It also seeks to engage in some of the issues I have mentioned and solicit further views on whether the public would seek to engage in recall or whether or not they think that the council taxpayers' purse would be at risk. So whilst being open to the sentiment expressed in the UKIP motion, we have raised a concern with it, and also where we feel a more appropriate measure could be pursued through the councillor conduct mechanism. We all have to accept our personal responsibility should be and must remain at the highest level. And whilst not using examples as has been done by UKIP, we should reflect that as a stronger democracy, we also need certainty of decision making. And councillors do have to make decisions that are against the interests sometimes of individuals within their own ward, especially regarding planning and other measures. It would lead to difficult decisions being not made by this authority if people were always concerned about recall, and so therefore I do feel a proper consultation should take place. This amendment is sensible, it is reasoned. I urge my colleagues to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor, do you wish to add anything?
Okay, back to Councillor Irvine.
Councillor Irvine.
Well, isn't it typical, Mr. Mayor? We had an opportunity to send out a clear message that we were on the side of the public. And what do we end with? A bunch of turkeys voting against Christmas through a wrecking amendment, and this is a wrecking amendment, let's be clear on that. It is no wonder that politicians are held in such low esteem when the establishment parties show once again complete disdain for the public and democracy. It is now clear that the only way we can bring balance back to politics is by delivering UKIP MPs to Parliament and UKIP councillors locally who will put people, not politics, first.